Well guys, welcome back today with a gaming PC build guide. Instead of my usual budget builds in which I show you a single PC, today I'm showing you how every single one of you can build a gaming PC like this one for very cheap. And we're gonna have two different alternatives because you can actually build this PC both fully brand new and used depending on how you choose to do it. Now the GPU and power supply are also gonna be up depending on your budget, and I'm gonna give you detailed info as to which one to pick in this period in 2024. So let's get started. Now the key thing to making the build work is going with a little bit of an older gen i9. What I have here is the i9 11900KF. Now you can buy this one on Amazon. For some reasons they have become really cheap, even brand new. But you can also buy one of these with the motherboard used for very cheap. I'm talking $200 for CPU plus motherboard is what you can find right now in the used market if you look for it good enough. Now this and the graphic card is actually going to be the only two components that I'm going to be recommending you eventually buy used if you want to save some money, because the rest you can just buy brand new and be perfectly fine. Now for the motherboard, what I have here today is a Z590A Pro. What I do recommend is that you get a Z series motherboard. Don't get a B560 or similar, but you can also buy a cheaper Z490 if it has the BIOS updated or if you're going to be updating the BIOS. So that's it for the motherboard and CPU combo. Now, there are two things we need the most: RAM and storage. Now, since RAM and SSD prices have really come down lately, I do recommend you buy both of them brand new. Now, of course, if you go ahead and get a used CPU motherboard combo, you might be able to get the RAM included for very cheap. But if that's not the case, many RAM manufacturers are still producing DDR4 RAM and they're doing it for cheaper than ever. So what I have here today is some Patriot Viper Steel RGB 3200 MHz RAM. You don't need high-speed RAM for this i9 because this Intel architecture doesn't really benefit from having high-speed RAM, to be honest. You can just get away with a kit like this. Still from Patriot Viper, I do recommend you buy a 2TB Gen4 drive. Now, Gen 3 drives are going to be plenty fine, sure, but Gen 4 drives are now cheap, and if you buy an 11th Gen CPU, the top slot on your motherboard will have Gen 4 compatibility, no matter what motherboard you choose, because it's actually a CPU-controlled lane. So that's a little tip for you guys. At this point, the only two things that are missing before talking about power supply and GPU choice are the case and cooler. Now, you'd be surprised, but we can actually handle this i9 11900K easily with a 120mm all-in-one cooler. And what we have here today from Gelid, our Gelid Liquid 140, is gonna do exactly that, because current gen i9s are extremely power hungry. So if you buy a 14th gen i9, you're gonna need a 306mm all-in-one cooler compulsory. However, if you buy one of these older CPUs, which I remember you, still share the current gen architecture, because not many people know this, but Intel actually made the 11th gen CPUs based on the 12th gen CPUs, but they had a bigger lithography. So unfortunately, they built them on more nanometer than they should have. So they cut off the efficiency cores. So this i9 has 8 cores, 16 threads, which are the performance cores of modern day CPUs without any efficiency cores. Having a little bit less cores allows it to run much cooler. And that's the key part, which will allow us to get a 120mm all-in-one cooler. And since we are going with the water-cooled CPU, we don't need such a big and expensive case. So what I have here today is the budget case from Gamdias, their Talos E3 Mesh White. Now they're also just about to launch a refresh, the Talos E3 Mesh White Elite, which is going to be costing basically the same and also be basically the same, but theoretically look a bit better. But here we have the older version. And now this thing is one of the most compact ATX cases on the market. So we can fit a full-size motherboard, CPU, and still have room for a full-size graphic card while maintaining a small footprint. So at this point, our build guide is towards the end. What's missing is the graphic card and the power supply. Why do the two go together? Because surprisingly, after you undervolt this i9, or even if you leave it at stock without tuning, which I don't recommend, it's not going to draw that much power. So you can actually get away with a 600-watt power supply, depending on which graphic card you pick. Now, the graphic card I'm going to be discussing actually in the end after we build the PC up, but this is our hypothetical graphic card. So this is not a model of GPU, it's just a metaphor for a GPU. And what this means is that this i9 can handle pretty much any GPU out there, okay? So it can handle from a 4060 Ti, which is the brand new option, cheapest I would go on the graphic card, which of course you can do with a 600-watt PSU, all the way up, in my opinion, to an RTX 4070 Ti Super, which is gonna be the top of the line, brand new card I would recommend for this build. And yes, you can actually fit it in this case with this cooler, etc. Just gonna need a slightly better power supply. I do recommend maybe you check out my videos about LC power supplies or silence power supplies, to be honest. But to just get a cheap, decent power supply, you'll be plenty fine. And pair it with the GPU you choose, which we will discuss in the end after we've built all the PC up. So first step, let's get into building, and then I will try out 3 different graphic cards and tell you my recommendation in the end. Okay, so let's open up the case, take a look at how small it is. Let's go ahead. Well, it's super light, it's super small, it's meshed, and honestly it looks very nice. So first impression is definitely good. It's definitely spacious. Now let's see if a 3-fan GPU would fit at first glance. So it looks like it wouldn't, however I think that if one really wanted, could actually make it fit, as you can see. So it's a pretty big case if even a trio from MSI fits in. Okay, so before slotting in the motherboard, let's actually put in the I/O shield. Now the case comes with 3 RGB fans, however we have our 120 from Gelid on the all-in-one cooler, which we will mount on the back, so we will actually get rid of this one. Let's slot the actual motherboard in. There we go. And here we are after quite a bit of testing. So first off, guys, please drop a like and a sub. Now let's get into it. First of all, I really like how the PC came out. I think the Gamdias Talos E3 White is honestly one of the best case in the 50 to 60 euros target, because honestly, where can you find a 50 to 60 euro case which comes with 3 RGB fans and supports a full ATX motherboard out there? I think it's one of the few available, and it pretty much comes out of the box ready for you to put a 240mm all-in-one cooler on top. Now today we went with the 120 mostly because I was curious to see if that could handle the i9, and also because it's very cheap. This Gelid cooler, it is 60 bucks on Amazon, extremely cheap. So we tested Pre25 small FFT to test the temperature of the CPU, and even there, with everything maxed out, the CPU slightly tweaked. With the power limit fully unlocked, it didn't reach 100 degrees, so I'm really happy. RAM, Patriot Viper, looks nice. 30GB is plenty fine for most applications, and the XMP works flawlessly, just one click and it was fully enabled. The SSD from Patriot Viper, the P400 Lite, amazingly good SSD. It comes without heatsink, but most motherboards have an heatsink. As you can see by the Crystal Disk Mark score, 7000 megabytes per second in read. It's very good performance. So with all that out of the way, let's actually discuss which GPU you should pick. Now, at this moment, we have a GT 710 in there, and I guess you can also keep in that configuration if you want an office PC for very cheap. You can put this PC together if you build it used with this case, this cooler brand new, and these RAM and SSDs for basically 400 bucks brand new, which is very cheap. But here we care about the gaming. So let's discuss gaming performance. Now, the first tier of GPU which you should pair in this kind of budget build is an RTX 3070 or brand new, an RTX 4060 Ti. They go exactly the same. So what is the performance with either one of these two? Well, on Apex Legends, you can get an average of 300 FPS with low settings, competitive settings basically. If you want to max out the game, it will go to around 200 FPS. Whereas Fortnite, it is a bit easier in competitive. You can even play on a 360Hz monitor on Fortnite because it will do actually 350 average FPS. But Fortnite is very heavy if you put everything to Epic. So if you put everything to Epic, still in Fortnite, it will go to just 70 FPS on average. Now Warzone, the heaviest competitive title, there you can do around 180 FPS on average. So if you want to step things up from this, the next tier of GPU is going to be what I have used quite a lot on the channel. So first off, I actually redirect you to one of my previous videos with an RTX 3090, which is what we're going to cover. You can take a look at my LC Power one, or at a few of my custom loops which I have on the channel. They're all pretty interesting in my opinion. We even built a wooden build with an RTX 3090. So it's my favorite GPU in the used market at the moment. It comes with 24 gigabytes of VRAM, GDDR6X, and that card is an absolute beast for render, AI, rasterization, stable diffusion, whatever you want, it's a beast. Can you cool it down? In this case, yes, that's probably the most important thing. I do recommend you undervolt it, I do recommend you tweak it and maybe change thermal paste and thermal pads, but you can definitely cool it in this case. Now, what will the step up in performance be? Well, pretty simple. Apex, you can basically max it out 300 FPS, even with higher settings. Or you can play 240 Hz 4040p, which I know a lot of you actually are starting to do. So that's very good in my opinion. I think it's a card for either higher resolution, because again, in Fortnite, for example, you can play there as well, around 280 FPS at 4040p competitively. However, if you want to play Warzone, the 3090 is a 1080p card, because in Warzone, you're going to be able to do, on average, 240 FPS with a 3090 overclocked at 1080p. 1440p, realistically, not higher than 170 FPS. Warzone at high resolution is incredibly heavy. Now, if you don't want to buy used, because remember, you can buy an RTX 3090 for $600 used easily. And talking about pricing a bit, let me go back. You can also buy an RTX 3070 for just a bit over $200 used, roughly 200 to 250 bucks used, whereas the 4060 Ti is around 350 where I live on average. But if you don't want to buy used, you can buy an RTX 4070 Super, which just came out. I also have an undervolting video on the channel in case you want to see how to do it, and basically performs just like the RTX 3090, because remember, the original RTX 4070 Ti performed just a little bit better than an RTX 3090, and the 4070 Super is in between the 4070, which is a 3080, don't get lost, and the 4070 Ti. So it's basically like a 3090, but it will perform worse in productivity and at higher resolutions in general. Now, how much can you push this i9? Top of the line, in my opinion, is an RTX 4070 Ti Super or the older gen RTX 4080. But there you start to have a bit of CPU bottleneck. I would not pair this thing with an RTX 4090. We have a bottlenecked video on the channel showing you what happens when you bottleneck a 4090, and I also have a video on why it's not a good time to buy a 4090 in case you're considering it. You shouldn't buy one at the moment, in my opinion. But with all that said, I hope this build guide will help you choose your next PC, or maybe choose which PC builds to flip. And if you like the video, again, please drop a like and a sub, and maybe give us some tip in the comments. Of course, any GPU in between the 3070 and the 3090 is also a very good buy. See you in the next one, guys. Bye.